I'm Esther, 62, sitting in my quiet kitchen with a chipped teacup, staring at a faded photo of my husband Harold from our first summer together in 1972. His smile, warm as ever, cuts deep now he's gone. Yesterday, my daughter-in-law Marlene called, her voice sharp with certainty, saying I'd get nothing from Harold's $77 million estate at tomorrow's will reading. I sip my tea, wondering if our decades of love were just a shadow. The photo catches the light, his eyes crinkling with that old mischief, and I remember the sunflower he tucked behind my ear that day, its petals soft against my skin. It's been years since I've thought of that moment, and it stings now knowing I'll face tomorrow alone. The kitchen clock hums softly, marking time I can't reclaim. I trace the photo's edge, feeling the ache of Harold's absence sharper in this quiet hour. A faint scent of chamomile lingers from the tea, pulling me back to evenings we spent planning our future. Have you ever felt your life's worth? Questioned. Share where you're watching from. And if this resonates, please like or subscribe to Grandma Stories Vault. I stood in my living room surrounded by the weight of years, knitted blankets draped over the couch. Harold's fishing hat hung on the wall, and a cracked vase from Joyce sat on the shelf gathering dust. My fingers traced the edge of a drawer, pulling it open to reveal a letter yellowed and soft from Harold. Dated 1980, the year Roger was born. It promised we'd always care for each other. I held it close, my chest tightening. Marlene's words from yesterday clawed at me. You're out of it. Her smugness at Harold's funeral flashed in my mind. Her whispers to Roger about securing their future. I folded the letter, slipping it into my purse, and chose the navy dress Harold loved, its fabric worn but comforting. As I dressed, the mirror showed lines etched by time, each one a story of sacrifice. Was it all for nothing? The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden. Eileen, my neighbor, stood there with a tin of cookies, her eyes soft with concern. You look troubled, Esther, she said, stepping inside. Over coffee, she spoke of her own family's greed after her husband's passing, how her children fought over his small estate, leaving her to mend the pieces. Her story mirrored my dread, amplifying the ache. I nodded, unable to voice the fear that Roger, my own son, saw me as a burden now. Marlene's influence had grown like a shadow over him, pulling him from the boy who once ran to me with scraped knees. I remembered a winter evening, Roger at 5, his small hands clutching mine as we built a snowman, his laughter bright. That warmth felt so far away now, replaced by a chill I couldn't shake. Eileen's hands, wrinkled but steady, passed me a cookie, its sweetness a fleeting comfort. I glanced at the clock. Time to go. The drive to the lawyer's office was a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. At a stoplight, I saw a young mother pushing a stroller, her face tired but glowing with purpose. I remembered those days juggling Roger's needs, while Harold worked late building our life brick by brick. Did Roger even recall those years? Or had Marlene convinced him it was just land, something to sell? The light turned green, but my thoughts stayed red heavy with doubt. I passed a corner store where Harold used to buy me licorice, a small gesture that felt like love. The memory tightened my grip, a reminder of what I stood to lose. A street musician played a slow tune, its notes drifting through my open window, stirring a pang of nostalgia for simpler days. Pulling into the parking lot, I sat in the car, the engine ticking as it cooled. Harold's letter pressed against my heart, a lifeline to a promise I wasn't sure held anymore. I stepped out, the air sharp with early fall chill, and walked toward the office. Each step felt like a surrender to whatever waited inside Marlene's words, looping in my mind, cutting deeper each time. I wasn't ready to face her or Roger's silence, but I had no choice. The door loomed ahead, and I braced myself, wondering if I'd leave with anything left of the life I'd built. A gust of wind carried the scent of damp leaves, and I paused, remembering Harold's habit of raking the yard each fall, his quiet pride in our home. That was gone now too, like so much else I'd held dear. The lawyer's office was a few steps away, its glass doors reflecting a pale version of me. I smoothed my dress, Harold's favorite, and pushed inside. The waiting room smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the warmth of home. My purse, heavy with Harold's letter, felt like an anchor. I sat hands folded, watching the clock tick toward the inevitable. Roger and Marlene weren't here yet, but their absence already pressed on me a silent judgment. I tried to focus on the letter's words, care for each other, but doubt gnawed harder. What if Marlene was right? What if Harold's promises were just echoes of a past that no longer mattered? A woman at the reception desk glanced my way, her smile polite but distant. I wondered if she saw an old woman clinging to scraps of dignity. My mind drifted to Joyce, my daughter, who hadn't called in weeks. I pictured her now lost in her busy life, her own children pulling her focus. When she was little, she'd draw pictures of our family stick figures, holding hands under a bright sun. Those drawings were packed away somewhere like my hopes for closeness. I swallowed my throat tight and checked my phone. No messages, just the hum of the office indifferent to my unraveling. I noticed a small plant on the desk, its leaves wilting slightly, and thought of the garden I tended with Harold, how we'd coax life from stubborn soil. That patience felt wasted, now a labor no one saw. Footsteps broke my thoughts. Marlene entered, her heels clicking sharply, Roger trailing behind. She wore a tailored suit, her hair pulled tight, exuding control. Roger's eyes met mine briefly, then darted away. His shoulders slumped. Marlene's lips curved into that same cold smile from the funeral, the one that made my skin prickle. She leaned toward Roger, whispering something, her hand on his arm. He nodded, barely glancing at me. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just about money, it was about them erasing me piece by piece from the life Harold and I built. I recalled a Sunday picnic, Joyce and Roger chasing each other through the grass. Harold's laugh, grounding us all. That joy felt unreachable now. I shifted in my seat, the letter in my purse, a fragile shield. I wanted to stand to demand Roger look at me, really see me, but my legs felt heavy. Instead, I watched Marlene adjust her watch, its gold glinting under the fluorescent lights. It was new, expensive, a stark reminder of her confidence in claiming what wasn't hers. I thought of the cabin, our sanctuary, where Harold and I carved out moments of peace. Roger knew its worth, didn't he? Or had Marlene convinced him it was just land something to sell? I remembered a night we'd spent there, stars bright above Harold's voice, soft as he planned our future. That dream felt mocked now, a relic in this sterile room. The receptionist's phone buzzed softly, pulling me back, but it couldn't ease the growing ache. Eileen's story from earlier echoed in my mind, her children squabbling over inheritance, leaving her to pick up the pieces. I saw myself in her alone in a fight I didn't choose. My fingers brushed the purse, feeling the letter's edges. Harold's handwriting, steady and sure, seemed to pulse under my touch. I wanted to believe he'd seen this coming, that he'd protected me somehow. But as Marlene's laughter cut through the room light and mocking, my heart sank deeper. The door to the lawyer's office opened and Leroy called us in. I stood, my knees unsteady, bracing for a truth I wasn't sure I could face. A faint hum of traffic outside grounded me, a reminder of a world moving on, indifferent to my pain. I clutched my purse tighter, as if it could hold me together. I followed Leroy into his office, the air thick with the scent of leather and ink. The room felt too big, its glass walls and polished desk swallowing me whole. I took a seat across from Marlene and Roger, their chairs angled close, a unit against me. My purse rested in my lap. Harold's letter inside it, like a heartbeat I could still feel. Leroy shuffled papers, his face unreadable, while Marlene's fingers tapped impatiently, her nails sharp and red. Roger stared at his hands, avoiding me. The silence was heavy, pressing on my chest. I noticed a framed photo on the wall, a generic landscape. Nothing like the lake view from our cabin. It felt wrong, too. Polished for this moment, like a lie in a room full of truths waiting to unravel. Marlene leaned toward Roger, her voice low but clear. "We'll sell the cabin first," she murmured. "Prime land, quick profit." My breath caught. That cabin was our refuge, where Harold and I watched sunsets, where he taught Roger to cast a fishing line in '95, promising it'd stay ours forever. I wanted to speak, to remind Roger of those summers, but my throat tightened, words trapped. Marlene's eyes flicked to me, sharp and knowing, as if daring me to protest. I remembered a morning there, Harold brewing coffee, the steam curling in the cool air, his quiet contentment my anchor. Now it was at risk, and I felt it slipping through my fingers like mist. I clutched my purse, the letter's edges digging into my palm. Last night, Catherine called, her voice warm with memories of Harold's kindness, how he'd helped her family when her husband lost his job. She didn't know how her words twisted the knife, reminding me of the man I'd lost, the life we'd built now threatened. I glanced at Roger, hoping for a sign he remembered too, but he just nodded at Marlene, his face blank. My heart sank, a slow bleed of disappointment. I thought of the long drives to the cabin, Roger asleep in the back seat, Harold humming softly. Those moments felt stolen, now replaced by this cold alliance before me. The office clock ticked each second, a hammer on my nerves. I noticed a pen on Leroy's desk, engraved with Harold's initials, a gift I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. Seeing it there, used so carelessly, felt like another theft. My fingers trembled, anger rising. How could Roger let her erase us? I thought of the cabin's porch, where Harold and I sat in silence, content. Marlene's plans would strip it away, like she was stripping me from my own family. I recalled a quiet promise we'd made there to always come back, no matter what. That vow felt fragile now, like a thread about to snap under the weight of this moment. Leroy cleared his throat, ready to begin, but Marlene's whisper cut through again. "It's what he would have wanted," she said to Roger, her tone final. My stomach churned. She spoke of Harold like she knew him better than I did, like our 40 years meant nothing. I wanted to scream to shake Roger awake, but I sat frozen, the weight of their alliance crushing me. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, as my anger mixed with grief, a storm I could barely contain. A faint scent of rain drifted through an open window, reminding me of stormy nights at the cabin, Harold's arm around me safe. I longed for that safety now, but it felt like a distant memory fading fast. Marlene's words hung in the air, sharp as a blade, and I felt my pulse quicken, a heat rising in my chest. I looked at Roger, willing him to speak, to defend the cabin, our family, me. But he just sat there, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the table. My hands gripped the purse, Harold's letter crumpling under my fingers. I wanted to pull it out, to read his words aloud, to prove our life wasn't disposable. But my voice stayed locked inside, choked by years of keeping peace. I remembered a winter night, Roger helping me bake cookies. His small hands sticky with dough, his trust absolute. That boy was a ghost now lost to me in this sterile room. Marlene shifted her chair, creaking, and tossed her hair with a flick of confidence. She spoke to Leroy now, her tone bright as if I weren't there. "We've got plans for the estate," she said, glancing at Roger for agreement. He gave a small nod, and something in me cracked. I saw us at the cabin, 1995. Roger's small hands holding a fishing rod. Harold's patient voice guiding him. That boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who let Marlene rewrite our past. I thought of the long walks we took there, Harold, pointing out constellations, his voice steady. Those stars felt out of reach now, dimmed by betrayal and silence. My mind spiraled to a morning months before Harold's death, when he'd sat at our kitchen table, weak but clear-eyed, talking about the future. He'd mentioned the cabin, his voice soft, saying it was our anchor. I'd nodded, not grasping the weight of his words then. Now, with Marlene's plans laid bare, I felt the ground slipping. Had I failed him by not fighting sooner? Had I let Roger drift too far? The guilt mingled with my anger, a bitter knot tightening in my throat. I recalled a quiet moment, Harold planting a rosebush, his hands gentle in the dirt, promising it'd bloom for years. Would it? Or was it just another promise, fading under this pressure? Leroy adjusted his glasses, his fingers brushing that engraved pen, and I felt another pang. It was like seeing pieces of Harold scattered unclaimed. Marlene's voice cut through again, now discussing timelines for the sale, her words clipped and efficient. Each one landed like a stone, burying the memories of our family's laughter by the lake. I wanted to stand, to shout that the cabin wasn't just land, but Roger's silence held me down heavier than her ambition. My eyes burned, but I wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of her. I thought of the quilt I'd made for Roger's 10th birthday, stitched with love, now forgotten in some closet, its threads unraveling like us. I glanced at the window, the city outside blurred by my unshed tears. I thought of Catherine's call last night. Her stories of Harold's generosity, now a distant echo. My life with him felt like a book no one else cared to read. Marlene's laughter broke my thoughts, light and careless, as she whispered to Roger again. My chest tightened, the air too thin. Leroy looked up, his expression shifting, and I braced myself, sensing the storm about to break. A distant siren wailed, pulling me back to a night Harold drove me home from the hospital, his hand steady on mine. I needed that strength now, but it felt like a whisper against the roar of my fear. Leroy's eyes crinkled, a faint chuckle escaping as he set the will down. The room went still. Marlene's confident smile frozen. My heart pounded, each beat loud in my ears. He cleared his throat and began reading, his voice steady, but laced with something I couldn't place. Harold's estate, 77 million, was not what Marlene expected. The bulk, Leroy said, pausing to glance at me, is tied to a trust, controlled by Esther. My breath caught a jolt of disbelief ripping through me. I saw Harold's face, pale in his hospital bed, his eyes searching mine as he spoke of protection. Had he planned this all along without a word to me? Marlene's face twisted, her chair scraping as she leaned forward. "That's impossible," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Harold wouldn't do that." She turned to Roger, expecting support, but he sat, rigid, eyes wide, staring at me. I felt exposed, like a spotlight had swung my way, and I wasn't ready. Harold's trust. Why hadn't he told me? My mind raced to a hospital room months ago. His frail hand squeezing mine, his words cryptic. Protect what matters. Had he meant this? I remembered his tired smile, the way he'd traced my palm. A silent vow that felt heavier now, like a mantle I wasn't prepared to carry. Frances Harold's sister sat across the room, her nod slow and knowing, as if she'd expected this. Her presence steadied me, a silent ally. But Marlene's anger filled the space, her words venomous. "You manipulated him, Esther," she hissed, her eyes boring into mine. "You played the devoted wife, didn't you?" I flinched, her accusations slicing through years of quiet sacrifices. I wanted to shout back, to tell her about the nights I sat by Harold's bedside, the meals I cooked, the dreams we shared. But my voice stayed trapped, my hands shaking in my lap. I thought of the scarf I'd knitted for him, still draped over his chair at home, untouched, a relic of love now questioned. Roger finally spoke, his voice low. "Mum, did you know?" His question stung, not because of doubt, but because he had to ask. I shook my head, unable to meet his gaze. The room felt too small, the air thick with tension. Leroy handed me an envelope, my name scrawled in Harold's shaky script. To be opened later, he said, his chuckle gone, replaced by a solemn nod. I clutched it, my fingers trembling. What had Harold hidden from me? And why did this victory feel so hollow? A clock chimed faintly, marking time. I couldn't reclaim, like the hours I'd spent reading to Harold in his final days, his breathing uneven but comforted. Marlene's voice rose, cutting through the stunned silence. You think you've won, Esther? She spat, her eyes blazing. Harold was delirious, signing papers you fed him. I froze the envelope in my hands, trembling. Her words painted me as a schemer, not the woman who'd held Harold's hand through endless hospital nights. Roger's gaze darted between us, his silence louder than her accusations. My throat burned the urge to defend myself, clawing inside. But I sat mute, pinned by her venom. I remembered a late-night talk with Harold, his voice weak, but certain, promising he'd always look out for me. Had I misunderstood him, or had he seen this betrayal coming? Frances leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. That's enough, Marlene. Harold knew what he wanted. Marlene scoffed, turning to Leroy. This trust is a mistake, she said, her tone daring him to disagree. Leroy's face stayed neutral, but his fingers tapped the desk, betraying a flicker of unease. I glanced at Warren Rogers' old friend, who'd slipped into the room quietly. His eyes met mine, soft with pity, reminding me of summer barbecues when Roger still called me Mum with warmth. Those days felt like a dream now fading under Marlene's glare. I thought of a picnic we'd had, Roger tossing a ball with Warren, their laughter a melody now lost in this tense air. The envelope felt heavy. Harold's handwriting, a ghost of his presence. I wanted to tear it open to find answers. But Marlene's next words stopped me cold. You'll ruin everything, she said. Her voice low, almost a growl. Roger's future, our plans gone because of you. Her words stripped me bare, exposing every fear I'd buried, that I was a burden, a relic in their modern world. Roger's hand twitched as if to reach out, but he stopped, his face torn. I recalled a rainy afternoon at the cabin, Harold teaching me to whittle, his laughter easing my clumsiness. That patience was gone now, replaced by this raw confrontation in a room that felt too small. I thought of our last anniversary at the cabin, Harold's weak laugh as we watched fireflies. He'd whispered about legacy, his eyes bright despite the pain. Had he foreseen this? My chest ached, the weight of his trust crushing me. Marlene's accusations echoed, each one a hammer against my resolve. I was the keeper of his wishes, but at what cost? The room spun, voices blurring, and I felt myself breaking alone in a sea of distrust, with no way out. A faint creak of the building settled like the weight of my own heart, heavy and unmoored. I clutched the envelope tighter, as if it could anchor me against the storm of this moment. I'm back home. I sat at my dining table, the envelope from Harold unopened before me. The house was too quiet. The tick of the clock, a reminder of the hours since the will reading. Marlene's accusations still burned her words, branding me a thief in my own family. I traced the envelope's edge, Harold's shaky handwriting blurring through my tears. My fingers hesitated, then tore it open. His letter spilled out pages filled with his careful script, urging me to protect our legacy, to keep our family whole. I read it slowly, each word a tether to him, to us. I remembered a quiet evening, Harold sketching by the fire, his focus a silent promise to me, to us. A vow I now held in my hands. I read his words twice, my chest tight with resolve and fear. He'd trusted me not just with money, but with everything we'd built. I couldn't let Marlene's venom erase that. I picked up my phone, my hands steady now, and dialed Roger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "Alone." "No, Marlene." He paused, his breath heavy, then agreed to meet tomorrow. My heart raced, knowing this could break us further. I thought of a summer evening, Harold and I watching fireflies from the porch, his hand steady on mine. That strength pushed me forward now, a spark in the dark of my doubt. Beatrice, my cousin, stopped by her eyes, kind but searching. Over tea, she shared how she'd stood up to her own kids, reclaiming her voice after years of silence. "You're stronger than you know, Esther," she said, squeezing my hand. Her story stirred something in me, a spark of courage. I thought of Nancy, my granddaughter, texting me yesterday about old recipes. Her innocence grounded me, a reminder of why I had to fight. I recalled a day I'd taught her to braid her doll's hair, her giggles filling the room, a moment of pure connection that felt like a lifeline now in this quiet house. I walked to the window, staring at the maple tree Harold and I planted decades ago. Its branches swayed sturdy despite the years. Harold's letter mentioned the cabin, his sketch of it, tucked inside a simple drawing with a note, "For our family always." I held it close, my resolve hardening. I'd spent too long staying quiet, letting Roger drift. Tomorrow I'd speak no matter the cost. The weight of Harold's trust settled in me, a quiet strength rising. I noticed a bird nesting in the tree, its small movements a reminder of life persisting even now. The evening light cast long shadows, and I felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real, like a candle in the gathering dusk. I spent the night awake, Harold's letter open on the table, its words a map to a courage I'd buried. By morning, my resolve felt like a quiet fire. I drove to the diner where Roger agreed to meet, the familiar hum of clinking plates and coffee brewing steadying my nerves. I chose a booth by the window, the morning light soft on my hands. Roger arrived, his steps hesitant, his face drawn. He slid into the seat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine. The diner's jukebox played a faint tune, one Harold used to hum, tugging at my heart. I noticed a small scratch on the table, a mark of time like the scars I carried inside each one, a story of endurance. I didn't wait for pleasantries. "Roger," I said, my voice low but clear. "Your father left me the trust to protect what we built, not to divide us." His eyes flickered, a mix of guilt and surprise. I spoke of the cabin, its porch, where we'd watched him grow its walls, holding our family's story. "Marlene wants to sell it," I said. "But it's not just land. It's us." He shifted his fingers, tapping the table, but he listened. I remembered a fall day there, Roger collecting leaves for a school project, his pride in each one a small treasure. Those moments were worth fighting for, worth every word I spoke now. I thought of Nancy's text, her simple request for recipes, a thread to the future. I leaned forward, my words deliberate. "I won't let it go, Roger. Not for me, but for her, for you." His jaw tightened, and he murmured, "Marlene thinks it's practical." I shook my head, my heart steady. Practical doesn't erase love. I saw a flash of the boy. He was the one who'd run to me with stories. I reached for that, not anger. I thought of the long evenings Harold and I spent planning for Roger's future, our hopes woven into every sacrifice, every quiet moment we shared like a quilt stitched with care. Beatrice's words echoed strength comes from standing firm. I felt it now, a clarity I hadn't known I'd lost. Roger's phone buzzed, likely Marlene, but he silenced it, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "I don't know, Mum," he said, his voice cracking. I nodded, letting the silence sit. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. I stood leaving the sketch of the cabin on the table, Harold's note visible. For our family always. I walked out my steps, sure the weight of silence heavier than words. The diner's bell jingled behind me. A small sound in the vast morning, like a whisper of possibility in the quiet dawn. I drove home from the diner, the sketch of the cabin left behind with Roger, its weight lingering in my chest. The morning light felt too bright, exposing every crack in my resolve. Had I pushed too hard, Roger's cracked voice echoed in my mind. His hesitation a fragile bridge between us. I pulled into my driveway, the quiet of the house greeting me like an old friend. My phone buzzed a text from Nancy, asking about my mother's bread recipe. I smiled her words, a small anchor, pictured her at 8, helping me roll dough, her laughter bright against the kitchen's warmth, a moment that felt like home even now. Inside, I sank into a chair, the silence heavy. Lloyd, the diner owner, had caught my eye as I left, sharing a quick story about his son's rebellion years ago. He'd said, "Time heals Esther, but it takes patience." His words stirred a flicker of hope, but doubt crept in. What if Roger chose Marlene's path again? I glanced at the maple tree outside, its leaves rustling, and felt Harold's absence sharper than ever. I remembered a spring morning, Harold pruning its branches, his care a quiet promise to nurture what we'd planted. That promise felt distant now, tested by time and choices beyond my control. My phone rang, Joyce's name on the screen. Her voice was soft, hesitant, asking how I was. Susan, her friend, had told her about the will reading about Marlene's outburst. I heard guilt in Joyce's pause, her distance these past months laid bare. I wanted to tell her everything, but I only said, "I'm trying, Joyce." She promised to visit soon, her words a thread I clung to. Yet the cabin loomed in my thoughts, its fate uncertain. I thought of the summer nights we'd spent there, fire crackling, Harold telling stories of his youth. Roger wide-eyed, his curiosity a spark we'd nurtured together. I walked to the kitchen, my hands restless. The table held a photo album, unopened for years. I flipped it to a picture of Roger at 10, grinning with a fish he'd caught at the cabin. The memory stung his joy, our closeness now frayed. Roger's silence at the diner replayed his phone buzzing with Marlene's call. Had my words reached him, or was I still losing him? The question hung unanswered as the afternoon light faded, leaving me in a quiet too deep to break. I touched the album's edge, feeling the years slip through my fingers like sand from the lake's shore, each grain a moment I couldn't hold. The photo album lay open, Roger's young face staring back, frozen in a moment we'd lost. I closed it, my fingers lingering on the leather cover, and stood needing air. The back porch creaked under my weight, the evening cool against my skin. I sat on the old swing, its chains rusted but steady, and stared at the yard where Harold once pushed Roger on a tire swing. The memory felt like a bruise, tender and sharp. My phone stayed silent, no word from Roger. I thought of a summer dusk, Roger chasing fireflies, Harold's laughter mingling with mine, a harmony now broken, its echo faint in the twilight. Susan called later, her voice careful. "Joyce feels awful, Esther," she said, "for staying away so long. She's scared to face you." I nodded, though she couldn't see my throat too tight to answer. Joyce's guilt was a mirror to my own years of unspoken words piling between us. I thought of the cabin, its wooden walls holding our laughter. Would Roger fight for it, or let Marlene win? His silence at the diner gnawed at me, a wound that wouldn't close. I recalled a quiet moment there, Harold carving a wooden spoon, his focus a quiet act of love, a craft he'd hoped to pass to Roger. I spotted a birdhouse Harold built, still hanging in the oak tree, weathered but standing. It reminded me of his quiet stubbornness, his belief in things that last. Roger's watch, the one Harold gave him, flashed in my mind. Did he even notice it anymore? I wanted to believe my words at the diner had stirred something, but his hesitation lingered heavy as the dusk settling around me. Lloyd's advice about patience felt distant now, drowned by the fear that I'd spoken too late. I thought of the long winters Harold and I spent planning for our kids, our dreams now fraying at the edges like an old blanket left out in the rain. The swing swayed gently, my hands clasped tight. I heard a car pass, its headlights slicing the dark, and wondered if Roger was out there wrestling with my words or burying them under Marlene's plans. The cabin, the trust, our family, it all hung in the balance, and I felt the weight of it alone. My heart sank, not with anger, but with a quiet ache, the kind that settles when you realize something may never mend. A distant owl hooted its call, soft but piercing, like the truth I couldn't escape. The night air carried a hint of frost, a reminder of time moving forward, relentless, yet somehow steady. I drove to the cabin alone, the road winding through pines that whispered memories. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun, its surface calm, unbroken. I stepped onto the porch, my fingers brushing the weathered railing Harold built with care. The air smelled of cedar and earth, grounding me. I sat in an old rocking chair, its creak familiar, and let the quiet settle. Marlene's anger, Roger's silence, the weight of the trust they felt distant here, like a storm that had passed. I remembered a morning here, Harold fixing a loose board, his hands steady, his smile my home. The memory warmed me even now, like a light in the fading day. I thought of Phyllis, the shopkeeper down the road, who'd shared her story of a family reunion that mended old wounds. "Keep trying, Esther," she'd said, her voice warm over a cup of tea at her store. Her words lingered, softening the edges of my hurt. I didn't hate Marlene anymore. Her sharpness came from her own fears, her need to control what she couldn't. Understanding didn't erase the pain, but it dulled its sting. I recalled a conversation with Harold here, planning our retirement, his dreams of teaching our grandkids to fish. That future felt fragile now, but not lost a hope I could still nurture. A breeze stirred the lake, rippling the water. I remembered a quiet moment with Harold here years ago, when we'd sat by the shore, no words needed. His hand had rested on mine, steady and sure. That memory felt like permission to let go, to stop carrying the guilt of Roger's choices. I pulled out my phone and texted Joyce and Nancy, inviting them for a weekend here. My fingers paused, then typed, "Bring the kids." I wanted laughter in these walls again. I pictured their faces, young and bright, running through the grass, as Harold once did with Roger, their joy, a thread to weave us back together. The chair rocked gently, the lake's rhythm soothing. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of water and wind wash over me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting. The cabin held me its quiet strength, a reminder that some things endure. I wasn't whole yet, but I was here, breathing, ready to rebuild what I could. A loon called across the lake, its cry echoing a sound that felt like both loss and hope intertwined. The scent of wildflowers drifted from the shore, a faint reminder of Harold's love for this place for us. The sun dipped lower, painting the lake in hues of amber. I walked to the water's edge, my shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. A small wooden dock stretched out where Harold and I once dangled our feet, talking about dreams we'd never chase. I sat there now alone, the cool boards grounding me. Carol had sent a photo earlier, Nancy baking with her kids' flour on their cheeks. It stirred a quiet hope, a reminder of what could still be. I thought of a winter day here, Harold teaching Nancy to skate her small hand in his Fearless. That memory felt like a gift, fragile but real, like a keepsake I could still hold. I thought of Roger, his hesitation at the diner, the watch on his wrist, a faint tie to Harold. I couldn't force him to choose me over Marlene, and I didn't want to anymore. Letting go felt like setting down a heavy load, my shoulders lighter. I picked up a smooth stone, its weight familiar, and skipped it across the lake. Each ripple spread, then faded like the anger I'd carried too long. I remembered a quiet evening here, Harold reading by the fire. His voice soft, filling the room with calm. That peace felt closer now, a whisper I could almost hold. Phyllis's words from the shop echoed reunions. Take time, but they start with one step. I'd taken mine, inviting Joyce and Nancy here. The cabin's heart, carved into its doorframe, pulsed in my memory, a promise Harold and I made to endure. I didn't need to win, only to hold space for what mattered. The lake stilled, reflecting the first stars. I stood my breath slow and walked back to the porch, the night wrapping me in quiet acceptance. A soft wind carried the scent of pine, and I felt Harold's presence not as a weight, but as a gentle guide, steady as the lake's quiet rhythm. I'm back in my kitchen, the morning light soft through the curtains. Joyce and Nancy are here, their voices weaving through the clatter of mixing bowls as we knead dough for Harold's favorite bread. The smell of yeast and flour fills the air, a warmth I haven't felt in months. I watch Nancy's hands, quick and sure, shaping the loaf, and Joyce's quiet smile as she wipes flour from her sleeve. It's not perfect, but it's ours, a moment carved from effort and time. I think of a Sunday morning years ago. Harold flipping pancakes, his grin wide as Joyce and Roger fought over the last one. their laughter a melody that lingers in my heart. Marlene, my friend from church, joins us, her laughter easing the room's edges. She shares a story of her own family's healing, how she found peace by letting go of old grudges. Her words settle in me, a reminder that wounds don't vanish, they soften. I pass Joyce the recipe card, my handwriting mixed with Harold's notes in the margins, a relic of our shared years. She lingers over it, her eyes tracing his scrawl. I remember the night we wrote it together, Harold teasing me about my messy penmanship, his warmth filling the gaps, a love that carried us through decades of small moments. I think of the cabin weekend we planned, the kids' laughter echoing soon, I hope. Gloria, Nancy's friend, sits across from me, asking about my life with Harold, her curiosity genuine. It makes me feel seen, not just as a widow, but as a woman with stories worth telling. I'm not the same Esther who sat trembling at the will reading. I've learned to hold my ground, not with anger, but with quiet resolve. I recall a quiet moment with Harold, watching him mend a broken chair. His patience a lesson. I'm only now understanding a strength I've found within myself after all these years. The dough rises slow and steady, like the peace I'm finding. Joyce touches my arm, her voice soft. "I'm sorry I stayed away, Mum," she says. I nod, my throat tight, feeling the weight of years lift just a little. "We're here now," I say, and that's enough. The kitchen hums alive with small sounds, and I let myself rest in them, knowing some battles are won by simply showing up. A ray of sunlight catches the table, warming my hands, and I feel Harold's love steady as ever, a quiet presence in this moment of rebuilding. The bread bakes its golden crust, filling the kitchen with a warmth that feels like home. I sit back, watching Nancy giggle as she sneaks a pinch of dough, Joyce scolding her playfully. It's a small scene, ordinary, but it holds me together. I think of Harold's final letter read again last night, his words urging me to keep our family whole. I shared it with Joyce earlier, her eyes softening as she read his hopes for us. "We're trying," I whispered, and she nodded, squeezing my hand. I remember a spring afternoon, Harold planting tulips, his quiet joy in small acts. A legacy I'm carrying forward, one careful step at a time. I realize now I can't control Roger's choices or Marlene's heart. That's not my burden anymore. Life taught me to carry love, not force it. I've spent years holding tight to what was fearing I'd lose myself if I let go. But sitting here with flour on my hands and laughter in the air, I see it clearly. Freedom comes from choosing to love anyway, through the cracks and the distance. I think of the long nights I sat alone, wondering if I'd failed as a mother, a wife. Those doubts don't own me now, replaced by a quiet strength I've earned through time and loss. I pick up a packet of sunflower seeds from the counter, a gift for Nancy, and smile. Harold loved them, their bright faces turning to the sun. I'll plant them with her, a small act to carry us forward. My heart feels lighter, not because everything's fixed, but because I've learned to live with what isn't. I'm still here, still Esther, and that's enough. I think of a quiet moment with Harold, his hand brushing mine as we watched the sunset. His love a steady pulse. I still feel guiding me through this new chapter of healing. What's a moment that taught you to let go and still love? Share it below if you'd like. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for sitting with me through this. Here's to finding peace in our own stories, one quiet step at a time.